When Elon Musk walked onto that stage, no one, not even the host, could have predicted the emotional chaos about to unfold. The lights were blinding, the cameras rolled, the set carefully polished for a high-profile tech CEO gleamed under the spotlight. Elon Musk stepped onto the stage, calm, collected, his signature half-smile in place. The crowd erupted into applause, a mix of adoration and curiosity thick in the air. He wore his usual style, a dark blazer over a simple shirt, understated but unmistakably him. The interviewer leaned forward with that familiar, eager expression, ready to dive into Mars, AI, or electric rockets. But something felt different. Elon looked distracted, still charming, but, different. The interview began like any other. A few jabs at Twitter, a nod to SpaceX, the usual back and forth that Elon fans knew well. But then came the shift, a pause, a breath, a hesitation that didn't go unnoticed. The interviewer narrowed his eyes, sensing something beneath the surface. "Elon," he said, lowering his voice just enough, "there's been a lot of speculation about your personal life recently. Anything you'd like to share with us today?" Elon smiled, but not the cocky, confident grin the world knew. This one was faint, almost nervous. A beat passed, then another, and then he spoke. "I've been keeping something very special to myself for a while now," he said, his voice steady, yet softer than usual. "But today, I'm going to share it with the world." The crowd stirred. The interviewer blinked. Elon turned just slightly, and for the first time the cameras caught a figure standing just behind the curtain. A woman, still, watching, waiting. It started with a smile and ended with millions watching in stunned silence. She stepped forward slowly, her movements hesitant, unsure. As the light caught her face, murmurs rippled through the audience. It was her, the woman rumored to be Elon's girlfriend, the one the tabloids whispered about but never caught. She was beautiful, yes, but not in a showy, flashy way. There was something quiet about her presence. Elegant, private, someone who clearly didn't chase attention. And yet now, she was at the center of it all. Elon stood as she approached. The world watched, not a single sound in the room except the faint hum of studio lights and the beat of their collective anticipation. He met her halfway, reaching for her hand. She hesitated just for a second, before letting him guide her to the center of the stage. The interviewer leaned back, eyes wide, sensing he was witnessing something far more personal than he'd bargained for. Elon turned to her. His hand held hers gently. Then he turned to the crowd. "I know this isn't what anyone expected from today," he said, "but sometimes life doesn't wait for the perfect moment. Sometimes the perfect moment finds you instead." His voice cracked just slightly at the end. Barely enough to notice, but enough to make hearts tighten across the room and screens alike. "I've had the privilege to innovate, to build, to explore the stars," he continued, "but nothing compares to what I feel standing next to this woman." She blinked, lips parting slightly in surprise. The crowd didn't cheer. They didn't gasp. They just listened, holding their collective breath, sensing the gravity of the moment. And then Elon Musk, the man known for rockets and reason, took a slow step back, looked into her eyes, and dropped to one knee. The world watched with bated breath. Then he dropped to one knee. It was like time froze. The crowd was silent. The interviewer froze. Even the cameras seemed to pause for just a split second, as if they, too, had to recalibrate what they were seeing. On one knee, Elon reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, black velvet box. "I've been waiting for the right moment," he said, his voice quieter now, trembling just slightly. "And I realized there's no better moment than right now." Her eyes widened. She didn't move, her body frozen in place, her fingers laced tightly together. "I love you," Elon said, "and I want the world to know that. I want you to know that. Will you marry me?" The silence was deafening. Her eyes brimmed with emotion, shock, disbelief, maybe even fear. This wasn't what she expected. This wasn't rehearsed. This was real. The crowd leaned forward in unison, as though physically willing her to respond, but she didn't. Not right away. She opened her mouth and closed it again. Her lips trembled. Her hand rose halfway to her chest, then dropped again. Her entire body was saying, "This isn't part of the plan." Elon remained kneeling, unmoving, vulnerable. The most powerful man in the room now looked up with eyes full of hope and fear. The woman, the mystery, the muse, looked down at him, and finally, after what felt like an eternity, she whispered, "Elon, this is unexpected." And in that moment, every person in that studio, and every soul watching from a screen anywhere in the world, knew one thing. This wasn't going to be a typical love story. One question, one silence, one moment that changed everything. She stood there, motionless. The air in the studio was thick, the weight of the moment pressing down on everyone. Elon was still on one knee, the ring in his hand catching the light, but it no longer sparkled with certainty. Her expression flickered between disbelief and heartbreak. No one expected hesitation, not from her. Her lips parted slightly. Then, at last, she spoke. "Elon, this is unexpected," she said softly, her voice shaking just enough to betray the storm within. The crowd murmured. The interviewer shifted in his seat, clearly uncomfortable. The cameras, however, remained steady. The lens trained tightly on her face, capturing every nuance, every breath. "I love you," she said, and for a brief moment, hope lit up Elon's eyes. "But I don't know if I'm ready. Not like this. Not here." Elon's jaw tightened. He stayed on his knee, though now his smile was fading, his eyes scanning hers with vulnerability. He hadn't planned for this. The audience could feel it. This wasn't a rejection, not completely, but it wasn't the fairy tale answer they had all been expecting either. I need a moment," she whispered. And in that moment, a new question gripped everyone. What happens now? Just when the silence became unbearable, she spoke again. The pause hung in the air like a suspended breath. Then she looked up, her eyes wet, her voice stronger now. "There's something I need to tell you." The crowd leaned forward. Elon's brows furrowed. Everyone could sense it. This was bigger than nerves. This was something else. "I've been offered a job," she said, "a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity." A beat. Elon blinked. "Okay, where?" he asked, cautiously. Her eyes flickered. "Across the world. It's with an international organization. They want me to lead projects in developing countries. It's what I've always dreamed of doing." The studio fell completely silent. Elon's face was unreadable. "When do you leave?" "They want me to start next month." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Elon slowly stood, his movements stiff, careful. He slipped the box back into his pocket, not angrily, but like a man collecting the pieces of a moment that had fractured too quickly. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" he asked, his voice low. She hesitated. "I was scared. I didn't know how you'd react. I didn't want to complicate things between us." Elon looked away. For the first time that night, he seemed small. Not the billionaire, not the innovator, just a man asking a question that had no easy answer. Could this proposal end before it even begins? The stage lights didn't dim, but the warmth in the room had shifted. What had started as a romantic spectacle now felt like something entirely different. Raw, human, painful. Elon and his girlfriend stood facing one another, the world around them reduced to static. "I don't want to lose you," she said, her voice cracking. "But I also can't give up on my dream. Not after everything I've worked for." Elon nodded slowly. "I get it. I really do. But, you're asking me to celebrate a future that doesn't include me." She stepped closer, her hand reaching for his. "That's not true. I want you in my future. I didn't expect both of these moments to collide like this." "Neither did I," Elon admitted. "But now that they have, what do we do?" She didn't answer. Instead, she looked down, tears slipping down her cheek. "Do you still want to marry me?" he asked, his voice almost a whisper. She looked up at him again. "I want to. I do. But I need to be honest with myself. With you. If I say yes now, I need to know I'm not giving up who I am." The audience was frozen. The tension could be sliced with a breath, and then she said the words that changed the direction of the night entirely. "This isn't a no. It's just, I need to be sure." Elon breathed in sharply, then nodded, slowly. "Then take the time," he said. "Just know, I'm still here." The silence that followed wasn't filled with heartbreak. It was filled with something far more powerful. Understanding. In the most vulnerable moment of his life, he surprised everyone. For a moment, no one moved. Elon stood there, the weight of her words still settling over him like fine dust. Around them, the studio remained silent. The lights felt brighter now, harsher. The pressure of the world's eyes bore down like gravity. He looked at her, really looked at her, the woman who had just pulled the floor out from under his perfect plan, not because she wanted to hurt him, but because she was being honest, because she cared too much to lie. And that, somehow, changed everything. He reached up and gently brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. "You don't have to choose," he said softly. She blinked. "What? You don't have to choose between your dream and us. We can figure this out together." The audience let out a collective breath, as though they had been holding it all along. She stared at him, heart pounding. Elon Musk, the man who had built rockets, defied industries, and challenged the world, was now standing in front of her, offering something far greater than power or wealth. He was offering compromise, partnership, real love. And for the first time that night, she smiled. It wasn't the proposal anyone imagined, but it was more real than anything else. The tension began to fade, not because everything was solved, but because something deeper had taken its place. Understanding. "I don't want to stop you from becoming the person you're meant to be," Elon said. "And I hope you don't want to stop me either. We're both chasing something bigger than ourselves. But maybe we can do that together." She looked at him, her chest rising and falling with each breath. "Are you saying long distance?" "If that's what it takes," he said. "If that's what lets us stay connected without either of us giving up what we believe in." She paused, then slowly nodded. "You mean that?" He reached for her hand again, this time more sure than ever. "I meant it the moment I got down on one knee. Whether you said yes today or 10 years from now, I meant it." Tears spilled freely down her cheeks now, not of fear, but of relief. "I've never loved you more than I do right now," she said. "You just proved to me that this is real." The crowd, who had remained reverently silent, finally let out a soft wave of applause, the kind that comes from watching something honest and raw. They weren't watching a billionaire and his mysterious girlfriend. They were watching two people in love, choosing each other over and over again in spite of everything. Just when you thought the story was over, she whispered something in his ear. As the applause settled into a low hum, the interviewer finally stood up, clearly shaken but respectful of the moment. "Thank you both," he said. "This has been, truly unforgettable." Elon smiled politely, still holding her hand. They stood side by side, their silhouettes softened by the stage lights. She leaned in. No mic picked it up. No camera zoomed close enough to read her lips. But whatever she said made Elon freeze, then widen his eyes. And slowly his face broke into a grin. The interviewer couldn't resist. "Do we get to know what she said?" Elon looked to her. She nodded just once. He turned to the camera. She said yes. The crowd exploded. Cheers, applause, laughter, tears, all of it crashed through the studio like a tidal wave. The emotion that had built and built throughout the entire segment finally had its release. And yet even in that moment of joy, it was clear. This wasn't just a happy ending. This was a new beginning. One built not on fantasy, but on truth. She wrapped her arms around him. He held her tightly. And for the first time all night, the future didn't seem uncertain. It seemed full of possibility. What happened after the cameras stopped rolling was even more powerful. As the lights dimmed and the cameras slowly began to pan out, something shifted. The noise of the crowd softened into a quiet hum, and for the first time that night, Elon and his now fiancée were alone, not in location, but in spirit. They stood hand in hand at the edge of the stage, bathed in the afterglow of an extraordinary moment. It wasn't just about the proposal. It wasn't just about the career, the job offer, or the hesitation. It was about what came next. They walked slowly, fingers still locked, sharing small glances and quiet smiles. She leaned in, resting her head gently on his shoulder, and he, the man often called the most calculated figure in tech, looked softer, more human than ever before. Backstage, the chatter of producers and crew melted into the background. For them, the show was over, but for Elon and his fiancée, the real story had just begun. "We did it," she whispered. "No," he replied, turning to her. "You did it. You chose you, and you still chose us." She smiled, and that smile said more than any headline ever could. What started as a surprise proposal on live television had transformed into something far greater, a testament to what love really looks like. Not perfect, not predictable, but real. They didn't have all the answers. The distance, the career, the uncertainty, it was all still ahead of them. But they had something stronger than certainty. They had trust. And in a world that often glorifies grand gestures, this one stood apart for a different reason. It embraced the unknown. It proved that love isn't about the timing or the spectacle. It's about showing up, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. As the screen faded to black, one final message lingered in the air. Sometimes the most powerful kind of love is the one that chooses to grow, even when the world is watching. And with that, the story of Elon Musk's unforgettable proposal didn't end. It simply began. If this story moved you, if it made you believe, even for a moment, that love and ambition can walk hand in hand, then don't keep it to yourself. Like the video. Subscribe for more stories that reveal the human moments behind the headlines, and share this with someone who still believes in love worth waiting for. Because sometimes, the most powerful stories aren't the ones that go viral. They're the ones that stay with you long after the screen fades to black.